My daughter asked if Daddy's friend living next door was going to be her new mommy since she already sleeps in Daddy's bed when I work the night shifts. I was braiding her hair for picture day when she said it. My hands froze. Mommy, when you and Daddy get divorced, can I still call her Sandra? Or do I have to say Mom? I laughed. I actually laughed. Baby Daddy and I aren't getting divorced. She looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand. But Sandra already picked which room will be mine at her house. She measured it with that tape thing. The brush fell out of my hand. Sandra, our neighbor, the woman I'd waved at 100 times across the driveway. Daddy told me not to tell you, my daughter added. He said it's a surprise. I stood there with the half-finished braid in my hands, Maya's head tilted toward me, patient in the way that 7-year-olds are patient when they think the adult is simply catching up to something they've already understood. The morning light was coming through the window above her desk, the kind of thin October light that doesn't warm anything, and I could smell the strawberry detangler I'd sprayed into her hair and the coffee I hadn't finished going cold on the nightstand. I looked at her face in the mirror. She was watching me with those careful eyes she'd had since she was a baby. The eyes that missed nothing, and I thought, she has known this longer than I have. My daughter has been living inside this information for weeks, maybe longer. And she had said nothing because no one had told her it was safe to say something. She had held it the way children hold things that confuse them, quietly, privately, with a kind of dignity that should have belonged to the adults in her life. I picked up the brush. I finished the braid. I put in the elastic with the pink rosette, the one she'd chosen the night before from the little box on her dresser, and I said we needed to hurry or she'd be late. And she believed me, because that is what children do when the adults around them hold the shape of normal even when the inside has caved completely. I drove her to school. I watched her run through the double doors with her backpack bouncing and her braid perfect, and her picture day cardigan slightly crooked at one shoulder, and I did not cry. I drove home on the same streets I had driven every morning for 9 years, past the dry cleaner and the gas station and the elementary school crosswalk with the crossing guard who always waved. And I was not crying. I was thinking, by the time I pulled into the driveway, I had already decided what I was going to do next. I want to be clear about something. I did not walk in trembling. I had spent 9 years working the overnight shift at St. Catherine's Medical Center, 12 hours at a stretch, keeping track of vitals and medications and patient charts while other people slept. And whatever else Marcus had decided about me in the privacy of his own conclusions, I was not a woman who lost her head when things became difficult. I was a woman who had learned, through repetition and necessity, how to move with precision when everything around her was going wrong. That skill, which Marcus had called my coldness on 3 separate occasions over the years, was about to be very useful to him in ways he had not yet considered. Marcus was in the kitchen when I came in, laptop open, coffee fresh, one of those easy smiles he wore when he was feeling settled inside his own life. He looked up. Hey, thought you were doing groceries. I walked past him without answering, down the hall. Our bedroom. I opened the closet on the left side, my side where I keep the things that belong to me, the navy wrap dress, the gray blazer I'd worn to every professional function I'd attended in the past 5 years, the 2 pairs of good trousers folded over the lower rod. They were gone. In their place hung clothing I did not recognize, blouses, several of them, with the tags still attached. 2 dresses in a cut and size that was not mine. A cardigan in a color I would never have chosen, that particular shade of dusty rose that photographs well and costs more than it should. Everything hung neatly pressed, as though it had always been there. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind me. I can explain, he said. I went to the bathroom. Sandra's toothbrush stood in the holder on the left, mine on the right, arranged with the casualness of someone who had decided which side was hers and not thought much more about it. Her makeup bag sat open on the counter, not tucked away, not hidden, just there with the zipper slightly parted and a tube of mascara resting next to my soap dish. Her shampoo and conditioner were lined up on my shelf. 3 bottles, labels facing out like a product display in a store where she was the only customer. She's not storing things, I said, more to myself than to him. She's moving in. You're being dramatic. He said it the way he always said things like that, not loudly, not with any anger in it, but with a kind of patient weariness, as though my perceptions were a recurring inconvenience. He had been doing this for years. I had a word for it now, though I had not had the word when it started. The way he would describe my accurate observations as emotional distortion, as overreaction, as the predictable excess of someone who was simply too tired to think clearly. I understood by then that what he called my exhaustion was actually my attentiveness, which had been inconvenient for him in ways I was only beginning to catalog. The difference between that morning and every previous morning was that I was not trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what he was telling me. I was only recording. She's in my bed, Marcus, 3 nights a week, while I work to pay the mortgage. You work those nights anyway, he said. What difference does it make who sleeps here? There it was. The sentence that had apparently been living inside him long enough to come out that cleanly, without hesitation, without any visible shame. I looked at his face when he said it and saw that he believed it completely. That was the thing about Marcus that had taken me the longest to understand. Not that he was cruel in the way of someone who enjoyed cruelty, but that he was cruel in the way of someone who had simply decided that his comfort was the organizing principle around which all other things should arrange themselves. He didn't think of it as cruelty at all. He thought of it as logic. I went to Maya's room. There was a notebook in the drawer of her little desk, the pink one with the butterfly on the cover that I'd bought her at the beginning of second grade. I opened it. The pages were filled with a story written in careful looping handwriting that was not Maya's, and was not mine. Illustrated with small colored pencil drawings of castles and flowers, and a little girl with a dark braid. The handwriting was Sandra's. I knew it from the note she had put in our mailbox 6 months earlier when her retriever had dug under the fence and into our yard. And I remembered thinking the handwriting was very deliberate, the handwriting of someone who thought about the impression they were making even in small things. The story was called Princess Maya's Adventure. In it, Princess Maya's mother was a healer who served a distant kingdom and had to travel very far away, so far that she could never come home. She was not a villain in the story. She was simply gone. And the beautiful neighbor who had always been kind and was always present became the queen of the house and Princess Maya's new mother, and everyone was happy. The drawings showed the princess and the new queen making cookies together, choosing curtains together, sitting in the garden with the king, who was tall and smiling and whose face in the drawings bore a specific resemblance that I did not think was accidental. At the bottom of the last illustrated page, in a different hand, Marcus's handwriting, which I had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and the deed to our house, were 11 words. Perfect. Maya will love this when we tell her. I stood in my daughter's room with the notebook in my hands for what felt like a very long time but was probably 30 seconds. Then I carried it downstairs and set it on the counter in front of him. When exactly were you planning to tell our daughter I was leaving? He glanced at it. Barely. Those are just stories. Sandra likes creative writing. Your handwriting is on the page. Lisa. The way he said my name, with that particular downward inflection, the one that meant he was now going to explain something I should have already understood. You're never here. Even when you are, you're exhausted. Maya needs a mother figure who's actually present. Sandra doesn't have to work. Her divorce settlement was generous. She can be there full-time for everything. School pickups, homework, dinners, the things you're always too worn out to manage. I looked at him. 9 years. I had worked nights for 9 years. Through the pregnancy and the newborn months when I would come home from a 12-hour shift and immediately take the morning feeding so that he could sleep, through Maya's ear infections and her kindergarten registration and her first broken bone, a hairline fracture in her left wrist from a fall off the monkey bars that Marcus had called me about at 2 a.m., and I had driven to the ER still in my scrubs. 9 years of building a life, paying down the mortgage, maintaining the health insurance that covered us all, and he had spent some portion of that time in the house I paid for, with a woman from next door preparing a notebook of illustrated stories to help our daughter understand that I was going to be replaced. I'm going to make you regret this, I said. He laughed. It was a short laugh, not unkind exactly, more dismissive than that, the laugh of someone who has already assessed the situation and found no meaningful threat in it. That was his first mistake. I called in sick. I almost never called in sick. My attendance record at St. Catherine's over 9 years was, if I'm being precise, 4 personal days and 2 weather-related call-outs, all documented, all covered. That morning I called in, and then I went through the house with my phone. I photographed everything, the blouses in my closet, each one with the tags visible, Sandra's toothbrush, the makeup bag open with each item identifiable, the shampoo bottles, the measuring tape I found sitting on Maya's dresser, a yellow Stanley with the brand name clearly visible, which Sandra had apparently left behind after measuring the room. Every page of the notebook, front to back, including the margin notes. Marcus's handwriting at the bottom, 11 words. I photographed it in natural light first, then with flash. I backed the entire album up to my Google Drive, then to iCloud, then uploaded it to a folder on Dropbox and shared that folder to my sister's email address with a note that said, "Keep this, don't delete, don't ask yet." Then I called Nora. Nora Vasquez had been the charge nurse at St. Catherine's Oncology Ward for 31 years. She had raised 4 children as a single mother after her husband left when her youngest was 2. And she had the particular quality of women who have weathered very specific kinds of unfairness. A steadiness that wasn't hardness, an ability to assess a situation without flinching from what it actually was. She listened to me for 4 minutes without interrupting. They always do it to the working mothers, she said when I finished. Because they know you're tired. They count on it. There was a pause, and then I heard her keyboard. I'm opening your file right now. I'm going to document your complete attendance record, your patient satisfaction scores for the last 3 years, your performance reviews, your commendations. Every single thing. If he tries to claim abandonment or neglect in front of a judge, I want a binder on that judge's desk before he finishes his sentence. She paused. Do you have a good attorney? I had an attorney by 5 o'clock that afternoon. Her name was Grace Okafor. She had been practicing family law for 22 years. The last 14 of them exclusively in custody and matrimonial litigation. And she had the kind of office that communicated everything about her without her having to say it. Not large, not flashy, bookshelves that went floor to ceiling, a desk that was completely clear except for the legal pad she was writing on and the reading glasses she pushed up when she was thinking hard. She read through the notebook, all of it. She read it slowly, the way she would read a contract, and when she was finished, she set it down and looked at me over her glasses. "This is premeditation," she said. "He has been planning this for months, not weeks, months. The stories alone are damning. but the annotation is remarkable. She tapped the last page, the 11 words in Marcus's hand. This is textbook parental alienation. He literally prepared your daughter to accept the narrative of your departure before he had told you the marriage was over. A judge will understand exactly what this is. She picked up her phone from the desk. My brother runs a private investigation firm. Before your next shift, I want cameras on your house. We need documentation of access, pattern of entry, and overnights. Can you get me her full name? I had waved at Sandra Kilner across the driveway for 4 years. I knew her full name. I knew she drove a white Audi Q5. I knew her divorce had finalized the previous spring and that she had mentioned once at a neighborhood block party that the settlement had been generous enough that she wasn't planning to return to work anytime soon. I knew that she had a golden retriever named Biscuit and that she grew tomatoes in raised beds along her south fence and that she had brought us a bottle of Malbec when we moved in with a card that said, "Welcome to the street." I gave Grace everything. 3 nights later, I worked my regular shift. I left the house at 10:42 p.m., and I drove to St. Catharines and I did my job, checking vitals and reading charts, and being present for 12 hours in the way that Marcus had apparently decided did not constitute presence. The cameras Grace's brother had installed, 3 of them, small, weatherproof, angled to cover the driveway, the front door, and the side gate that led to the backyard, were running by the time I pulled out of the driveway. Sandra arrived at 11:09 p.m. She parked the white Audi 2 houses down, not directly in front, which was itself interesting. She carried an overnight bag. She used her key, to my house, on a deadbolt that had been rekeyed 18 months earlier when we thought we'd lost our spare. The following Monday, Grace filed for emergency custody evaluation. She included the notebook, the photographs, the surveillance footage from all 3 cameras, and a preliminary affidavit from Nora documenting my employment record in full. The motion cited parental alienation, marital waste of shared assets, including the mortgage payments on a home where a third party had been granted access using a key the other spouse had not authorized, and a pattern of conduct designed to prejudice the minor child's relationship with her mother. Tuesday at 2:14 in the afternoon, Marcus was served. My phone rang at 2:31. I was checking vitals on a patient in room 7. I stepped into the hallway and answered. He was screaming. I had heard Marcus raise his voice perhaps 6 times in 9 years of marriage, and each time it had startled me in that specific way that loud sounds from previously quiet people always do, not because of the volume, but because of what the volume revealed about what had been sitting below the surface. This was not that kind of voice. This was the voice of a man who had been comfortable and had just become very uncomfortable very quickly. What did you do? You're overreacting to a friendship. This is insane, Lisa. You're going to destroy our family over a friendship. Have your attorney contact Grace, I said. I hung up. He called back. Immediately. Then again. Then 11 more times over the following 4 hours, each voicemail slightly more ragged than the one before, moving from fury to explanation to something that by the 14th message was attempting to approximate remorse. I forwarded every single one to Grace without listening to most of them. Keep ignoring him, she said when I sent the last batch. Let him keep going. Every voicemail is a record of his state of mind and his willingness to disregard your boundaries through direct contact after being formally served. The more he says, the more we have. I drove home at 7:43 a.m. after my shift, still in my scrubs, my hair in the same braid it had been in since the night before. Sandra was standing in my driveway. She had dressed for this. That was the thing I noticed first. She had not come out in what she was wearing when she woke up. She had put on real clothes, a camel-colored coat that I recognized as expensive from 20 feet away, and dark trousers and boots with a heel. And she had her arms crossed over her chest in the specific posture of someone who has decided they are in the right and intends to demonstrate that physically. She was a beautiful woman. I want to say that plainly because the story is not improved by pretending otherwise. She was tall, well put together, with the particular ease of someone who had never had to think too carefully about money, and she had made herself into a formidable-looking thing standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning to tell me something. You need to stop this nonsense, she said. Marcus told me what you filed. You're trying to take Maya away from him. That little girl loves her father. My hand was in my scrub pocket. I pressed record. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? I asked. She stopped walking. Something moved across her face, a brief recalculation, and then she did something I had not expected. She smiled. It was not an embarrassed smile or a caught smile. It was the smile of someone who had decided that the honest answer was also the winning one, that the truth would land harder than a denial. 6 months, she said. He's unhappy, Lisa. He's been unhappy for years. He needs someone who can actually be there for him. You're always at the hospital, you're always tired, you're always somewhere else. So you decided to move into my house. Marcus invited me. It made sense. Maya likes me. She talks to me about things she can't talk to you about because you're not here, and when you are here, you're exhausted and distracted. And I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned the screen toward her. Recording 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Her face went white. Not pale, white, the specific white of someone who has just understood the dimensions of an error they cannot undo. You can't record me without... Single-party consent state, I said. I only need my own permission to record a conversation I'm part of. She took a step toward me. Then another. There was something in the way she was moving, the arms uncrossing, the chin coming up, that was meant to be intimidating and would have been, I think, to a different version of me, the version who had come home 9 years of mornings, tired and uncertain, and willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the wrong people. Delete that right now. I took one step back toward my front door. Stay away from my family, I said. Your family? The crack in her voice when it came was sudden, a split right down the middle of the composed performance she had constructed in my driveway. Marcus wants to be with me. Maya needs a real mother. Not someone who comes home too exhausted to read her a bedtime story, not someone who misses the school play because of a double shift. She needs someone who is actually there. And I am there, and you should be grateful that someone is stepping up when you can't. I locked the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment with my back against it, and then I went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and sent the recording to Grace. She called in 5 minutes. That recording is going directly to the judge, she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite satisfaction but was adjacent to it. The tone of a professional who has seen a case that was already strong become considerably stronger. She admitted to the affair, admitted to the duration, admitted to her presence in the house, and made several statements that bear directly on the parental alienation claim, specifically the assertion that Maya talks to her about things she can't talk to you about, which in context will be understood by any judge as the result of deliberate conditioning. A pause. Lisa, she just confessed to everything. I'm filing for a restraining order this afternoon. Emergency basis, given that she approached you on your own property after service of process. By 5 o'clock, the order was granted. Sandra Kellner was to remain no fewer than 100 yards from me, from Maya, and from our shared residence. Violation of the order was a criminal matter, not a civil one. By 9 o'clock that night, she was inside the house. My phone rang at 9:17. Unknown number. Mrs. Turner, this is Officer Reyes. We're responding to a restraining order violation at your residence. Your husband let her in. I drove home. I parked down the street the way she had the night the cameras caught her. Though my reason was different. I needed a moment to sit with the information before I walked into it. Marcus had let her in. He had done it the same day the order was served, in the home where his daughter was sleeping, in direct violation of a court order less than 4 hours old. Whether he had done it out of defiance or out of genuine inability to understand the seriousness of what he had set in motion, the effect was identical. I called Grace from the car. It was 9:23. They served him with the order, she said. At 2:14 this afternoon, I forwarded you the confirmation. A pause. Stay where you are. I'm calling the duty judge. Officer Reyes was a compact woman in her late 30s with close-cropped hair and the manner of someone who had seen a great many domestic situations and was no longer surprised by any of them. She met me at the curb. Inside, Marcus was in the living room with Sandra, who had apparently not left after being admitted and was sitting on my couch in the camel coat she'd worn in the driveway that morning. And the scene had the particular quality of a tableau that had been arranged without any consideration of how it would look from the outside, which is to say, it looked exactly like what it was. He invited me, Sandra said when Officer Reyes asked her directly. I have a right to be here if he invites me. An invitation from the co-occupant doesn't supersede a court order. Co-occupant? Marcus said. I own this house. The order was issued, Reyes said, in the tone of someone who was not going to repeat herself. On behalf of your wife and your minor child who also reside here. The property address is named in the order. She needs to leave. Sandra left. She walked out past me without looking at me, the heels of those boots precise on the walkway, and she got into the white Audi that was parked 2 houses down, and she sat there for a moment before she drove away. Marcus stood in the doorway watching her go. His face, when he turned back to me, had the look of someone who was beginning slowly and with great resistance to understand that the situation was not going to resolve in the direction he had assumed. Grace's call to the duty judge resulted in a violation filing that was time-stamped at 10:51 that night. The filing documented the time of service, the elapsed time before violation, the presence of law enforcement, and the Officer Reyes report that Marcus had verbally confirmed he had admitted Sandra to the property with full knowledge of the order. The custody evaluation was scheduled for the following Thursday. The evaluator was a psychologist named Dr. Miriam Cho, who had been doing this work for 18 years and who conducted her interviews with the patient, unhurried attention of someone who understood that children communicated the important things sideways, in the margins of what they were saying, not in the center. She interviewed Maya for 45 minutes in a room with a small table and art supplies and 2 chairs sized for children and 1 sized for adults. I sat outside. Marcus sat at the opposite end of the hall. We did not speak. I had not tried to prepare Maya for the interview. I want to be precise about this, because it matters. I had not told her what to say or coached her toward any particular account. The night before, I had sat with her on the edge of her bed and told her that she was going to talk to a woman whose job was to make sure that kids felt safe and happy, and that the woman was going to ask her questions, and all Maya needed to do was tell the truth about whatever she was thinking. Maya had nodded with the seriousness she brought to things that seemed important to her and said, "Even about the notebook?" I told her yes, even about the notebook. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sandra said not to tell you about it." I said I knew. She said, "Does Daddy know I told you?" I said we didn't need to think about that right now. Dr. Cho's preliminary report was delivered to Grace 6 days later. It was 43 pages. I read all of it. The relevant findings, distilled, Maya had expressed in her own words and unprompted, that Sandra had told her her mother was going to go away like Sandra's own mother had gone away when Sandra's own mother had gone away when Sandra's own mother had gone away when Sandra was little. That Marcus had told her the notebook was a practice story for something that was going to happen soon and that she should think of it as exciting, like a movie. That she had been instructed on at least 3 occasions not to mention Sandra's name to me, and that she had understood these instructions to mean that there was something happening that her mother did not know about and would not like. The phrase Dr. Cho used in her report was sustained and deliberate manipulation of the minor child's perceptions and emotional expectations. The recommendation was immediate primary physical custody to the mother, supervised visitation for the father pending further evaluation, and a formal guardian ad litem appointed to represent Maya's interests going forward. The hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in November in a courtroom on the 4th floor of the County Family Court building, and Marcus brought his attorney and both of his parents and a character witness. A neighbor from 3 houses down named Gerald, who apparently intended to testify that Marcus was an involved and present father, which was when Gerald would have observed him. Marcus wore a suit I didn't recognize, dark navy, well cut, and he had the look of someone who had been coached carefully about demeanor, the appropriate degree of concern, the slight forward lean of a man taking things seriously. I had seen this version of him before. He was very good at it. Grace put Nora on the stand. Nora testified for 11 minutes and 40 seconds about my employment record, my patient outcomes, my attendance, and the single occasion over 9 years when I had left mid-shift, the night Maya fractured her wrist, which had been formally logged, covered by a colleague, and retroactively approved by hospital administration. She testified in the same tone she used to brief residents, which was to say, precisely, without drama, with the particular authority of someone who does not need to perform credibility because they have never needed to. Grace put Dr. Cho on the stand. The 43-page report was entered into evidence. Grace put the notebook into evidence, and the photographs, and the surveillance footage, and the 14 voicemails and Officer Reyes's incident report from the night of the restraining order violation, and the recording from my driveway, 2 minutes and 14 seconds, which was played through the courtroom speakers at a volume that was sufficient for everyone present to hear. Sandra say, clearly, 6 months, he's unhappy. He needs someone who can actually be there for him. Marcus's attorney objected to the recording. The judge overruled him. Marcus's father, a man named Harold, who had always been pleasant to me at holidays, and who I had thought for 9 years regarded me with straightforward warmth, put his hand over his mouth when the recording played. It was a small gesture. But I noticed it, and I watched his face in the seconds that followed, and what I saw was not the face of a man who was surprised. It was the face of a man who had known something and was only now understanding what that knowledge had made him complicit in. Marcus's attorney attempted to introduce testimony that I was emotionally unavailable due to the demands of my work schedule, that my absences had created instability for Maya, that Marcus's arrangement with Sandra, whatever its origins, had in practice provided Maya with more consistent daily care than my shift schedule permitted. The judge listened to all of it. She asked 3 questions. The third question was, "Counsel, can you point me to any evidence in the record that the mother was made aware of her husband's relationship with this individual before the custody filing?" There was a pause. "No, Your Honor. Can you point me to any evidence that she was consulted before a third party was given a key to the marital home?" "No, Your Honor." "Can you point me to any evidence that any of this was disclosed to the mother in any form by any party before her 7-year-old daughter mentioned it while getting her hair braided?" The attorney didn't answer. He looked at his legal pad. Marcus, beside him, was looking at the table. That was enough. Primary physical custody was awarded to me, effective immediately, with a formal parenting plan to be established within 60 days. Marcus was granted supervised visitation 2 afternoons per week at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor present, pending the outcome of the ongoing parental alienation evaluation. The marital home was to remain occupied by me and Maya until the divorce proceedings determined final disposition of the asset. The judge also issued a formal finding that the restraining order violation on the night of the custody filing constituted contempt of court. Marcus was assessed a fine of $4,500 and warned, in language that was specific and unhurried and that I believe he finally heard, that a second violation would result in a criminal referral. The divorce proceedings took 7 months. I will not walk through all of it because some of it is still not entirely resolved and some of it belongs to Maya more than it belongs to this story. But the relevant pieces, the marital home was appraised at $487,000. Marcus's attorney argued for immediate sale and equal partition. Grace argued that forcing the sale of Maya's primary residence during an active parental alienation evaluation was contrary to the minor child's best interests, and that I should be permitted to remain in the home and buy out Marcus's equity over a 36-month period at a fixed rate to be agreed upon. The judge agreed. Marcus also owed me, as determined by the court, $23,400 in retrospective contribution, the amount by which my documented financial contributions to the household over the prior 18 months exceeded his. A calculation that became relevant once Grace subpoenaed his bank records and discovered that he had, over that same 18-month period, spent $31,700 on Sandra Kellner, including hotel stays, jewelry from a store on Fifth Avenue, restaurant bills, and a weekend in Montreal that he had told me was a work conference. The bank records also showed that $8,200 of those expenditures had been charged to a joint credit card in my name. The credit card fraud referral went to the DA's office in February. I have been told the matter is being reviewed. Sandra Kellner retained an attorney of her own, a decision that became complicated when Grace sent her attorney a copy of the driveway recording, the surveillance footage from all 3 cameras, the Officer Reyes report, and a 12-page letter outlining the ways in which Sandra's conduct over the preceding months might be construed as tortious interference with the marital relationship and as a contributor to the parental alienation finding. Sandra's attorney responded once. Grace has not heard from them since. Nora retired in April. There was a party in the break room with a sheet cake and a card signed by everyone on the floor, and Nora cried, which was the first time I had ever seen her cry in 9 years of working beside her. She hugged me for a long time at the end of the night and whispered something in my ear that I will not repeat here because it was not for anyone else. And then she put on her coat and walked out, and the hallway felt different without her in it. Maya is 8 now. She sleeps through the night most nights, which she wasn't doing for a while after everything settled. She got a new notebook, purple this time, and she fills it herself with stories about a princess who is also a scientist who builds things. The princess's mother in the stories is a healer who works very hard and comes home every morning and makes eggs. I have read all of them. I am not the most present mother in the world, and I never will be because I am also a person who has a job and a mortgage and a finite number of hours in a day. But I am a present mother. I am the mother who was in that courtroom. I am the one who is here. Marcus and I exchange exactly the communications required by the parenting plan. He attends his supervised visitation. He has been, as far as I can observe, appropriate and careful since the contempt finding. Whether he will remain so is a question for the future to answer. Sandra Kellner sold her house in March. The white Audi left the street before I even noticed the for sale sign had gone up. The street is quiet in the mornings now. I come home from my shift and I make eggs, and I sit at the kitchen table for 20 minutes before Maya wakes up, and I drink my coffee before it goes cold. Biscuit, Sandra's retriever, apparently went with her. I don't miss the dog.